Well, I have been waiting for this project for quite some time now, and of course I saved it for last just because I wanted to get my feet wet and get some experience under my belt as far as assembling flowers, because it's been a while since we've done a floral project. And you can see behind me there I've got the topiary from one of our previous releases. I believe it was a fall release. And that guy was on my table from the time we released it all the way through until Christmas. So probably about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. And I'm excited to put that out, but I needed something for spring and summer. And this is just the arrangement for that. We've got 4 different flowers that we're going to incorporate into this arrangement. And I've got everything here in front of me. And we're going to go through it one by one, just so that you guys understand and get the experience of putting together everything in this bundle here. So first and foremost, let's start with some flowers. Okay, I'm going to start with my rose here. And here are the pieces of the rose. We've got a leaf. I believe this is called the calyx. We've got some stamen there. We've got 2 small pieces, actually I'm sorry, 3 small pieces and 2 large pieces. Okay, now we did do some inking on this, and I'm going to show you exactly what I did. Now we cut this out of a peach, pinkish color, and I'm going to ink the leaves, or the petals I should say, with a nice orange color. And then we're going to hit the edges, just the edges, with a nice orangey red color. Okay, so this might get a little monotonous, okay, because I'm just going to be doing basically the same stroke on the entire flower here. And I'm not going to be overly concerned with trying to get my ink in between the petals. I think I kind of realized that as long as I get a little bit of ink in there, the focus is going to be mostly towards the edges of our little petals here. So I'm just going to try to make that really awesome, and then definitely going to try to hit all the sides of it, but I'm not going to torture myself trying to make sure that everything is perfect, because ultimately we're going to be training these pieces and kind of using light and the training process to add even more dimension to them. So the inking is kind of the cherry on top. Okay, so you kind of see what I did there. And this project has a total of, I believe, 4 roses. Are these the roses? Yeah. Yeah, so we're going to be making 4 of these guys. All right, I'm only going to show you one, because I've done a lot of pre-prep. If you guys follow the site in the official Dreaming Tree group on Facebook, you'll know that just a couple days ago I posted that I've been MIA because I've been working on getting everything prepped for this video shoot for about 2 days, on and off, obviously, because I'm doing emails and it's actually tax season, so I had to get all my corporate and personal taxes ready for my accountant. And that was a pain in the butt, because I have to actually go in and record every single transaction and every single purchase, and I have to assign it a tax value and all this crazy stuff. So anyway, aside from that, this is kind of what I've been doing. I've been making flowers for going on, this is probably my 4th day now. And it wasn't, like I said, I didn't spend the entire day doing it, so don't think that this isn't that tough of a project. But if you really want to make it stand out and be awesome, I would take the time to get your ink on these and really jazz it up, bring it to life even more, because you can see that the paper is, well, it's monotone. It's just a single color, and that's not always the most interesting. So You can see my technique here. I'm dabbing my ink onto my little felt applicator pad. This is by Ranger or Tim Holtz. You can find it under his name too. And I'm just grazing the edge. I'm focusing my strokes on the edge, and I'm grazing the top surface just ever so slightly to leave a little bit of a gradient look on there. And that's how I do it. I don't like to go overly heavy on the inks, and you are welcome to do it however you want to do it. And use whatever applicator you want to use, whatever inks you want to use, and you can make the colors whatever color, or you can make the flowers whatever color you want to make them. So that is completely up to you. And again, I'm just going around, leaving some ink right along the edges there. And for this arrangement, we're going to go through each flower individually from start to finish so that there's some sort of method to the madness here. Okay. There we go. And that just leaves one more. Okay. So you're going to be doing this a total of 4 times. You're making 4 of these. This one's pretty easy once you get the inking down. And you know, again, the inking's optional. You know, when we finally finesse and train these petals, it's going to create some interesting shadows and some interesting dimension that will add to the look of the flowers just naturally because of that technique. So the inking process is optional. You don't have to do it, but you should. But you don't have to. I'll still think it's amazing, even if you don't, especially if you take your time in finessing and training each little petal and giving it that extra love to make it unique, because each flower is going to be unique, just as it is in nature. Okay, so I'm pretty much through it here. I'm being a little more free with these here. Okay, so next what we're going to do is I'm going to take this, it's called Red Magic. It's probably the most orangey red I have. And what I did was I didn't even use an applicator. I just ran this right along the edges, and I wasn't overly concerned about getting it too far in. And sometimes I would hit it just at the top a little bit, just to get a little bit of tinge of that red right on the petal, the edge of the petal. It's almost like the petal's been around for quite some time, and maybe the sun is kind of burning it a little bit. It's kind of the effect that I'm kind of seeing from this. Okay, so I'm just going to go around, and you could technically lift that up a little bit and hit the inside a little bit more as well. And I rarely use the ink pad directly like this, but I am literally just hitting the edges here, so there's no sense in using an applicator for that. Okay, now with this smaller one, definitely I'm not going to worry too much about going on the inside of the petal, just running it across there like that. Okay, and maybe that one I'll hit a little bit more. You gotta be careful with these applicators, or with the actual ink pads, because things can kind of get out of control really quick if you're not careful with it. Okay, so I'm just working my way around, getting my ink on there, and that little bit of contrast, that two-tone look, makes it look really pretty. There we go. It's actually 3-toned if you count the actual paper itself. This looks more real. There we go. Okay. So we'll call that done. And with the little stamen piece here, I'm going to grab the other side of my, actually, well, I still have orange on this, but you know what? I'm going to take my stamen piece and I'm going to use the applicator itself. And I'm just going to hit that with some orange. And one thing you should do is hit both sides of it. And you know what? Actually, I think this works better with the applicator. Yeah, I like that better. Okay, so we've got the petals all done here. I'm gonna grab another applicator. I'm gonna grab my dark green. This is Cottage Ivy. This is also a dye ink. And we're gonna hit the little leaves. So by the way, when you get ready to create these, just remember to take 3 small ones and 2 large ones and set them aside for each flower. So you're gonna have 4 times this. So there's gonna be 12 of these small ones and 8 of these big ones. But you want 3 small, 2 large for each flower. All right, so anyway, on to our little, onto our actual leaves here. I'm gonna use my applicator for this, and I'm just gonna hit this. I might need a little more than that. Just hitting the edge and grazing the surface. And what I'll probably do with this one is on one side, haven't decided which side yet, I'm gonna bring the ink in more than on the other side. Let's just go on the other side real quick and just lay our ink down. Just real quick, nice and gentle. The less ink you have, the harder you want to press. The more ink you have, the less you want to press. Okay, so, and I've decided that I'm going to go heavier on this side. So I'm going to work the surface on this side a little bit more, just to kind of get that effect where one side is just a little bit darker than the other side. Okay, that looks cool. You can kind of blend that a little bit more maybe throughout the center there. That's fine. Okay, so we've got that inked. Now we're going to do this piece here. This piece is going to be fairly hidden, but I'm just going to hit it anyway, and I'm probably just going to do one side of it. You're really not going to see this piece very much. It's going to be hidden. It's going to keep everything together for us though. And we want it to be botanically or anatomically, I guess, well, botanically since it's a flower, correct. So I've got that included in there. Okay, so inking is done. Now we're going to grab one of these floral stems here. These come at 18 inches. I've cut it to 9 inches so that I basically got them cut in half. Okay, and I'm going to use a dark floral tape on this one. And we're just going to coat this whole thing in some floral tape before we begin doing anything else. So just make sure that you get enough, stretch it out so that you got your sticky element on there, and just wrap it around the floral wire here until you've got it nice and coated all the way to the bottom. And then you can just rip that off. It doesn't have to be perfect at the bottom because it's going to be shoved into our little container at some point. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is get our stamen in place, and I'm going to grab a dowel and just kind of curl the stamen just so that it's easier to work with. Just train it a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to get my glue. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the actual piece here, and we're going to start on one side. Just going to lay it flat, move that out of the way, and just leave that flat for a second. You can kind of push down, and then I'm just going to do little drops of glue, little dots, or even a line is fine. throughout the entire bottom portion here. Okay, oops, that's okay. That kind of stuff's going to happen when you're working with little elements like this. And I'm just going to take this and I'm just going to wrap it around my floral wire, my floral stem, whatever you want to call it. Nice and tight. And then we're just going to take that and hold it in place until it gets a good hold. Now this is the one instance where a little extra glue is actually not bad because it almost like gets the paper wet and makes it less rigid. It loosens it up a little bit. And then it'll dry nice and hard for us. And it'll create a nice little foundation for our rose. Okay, so that being said, we're gonna leave this to dry for just a minute and we're gonna work on, we're gonna grab the 3 small pieces here. Okay, and for the first layer here, just grab like, well, this is probably a little bit bigger than a 1/4 inch, a little bit smaller than 3/8 inch. So whatever that is, I'm not really good at math, but I'm just using this little pen here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to crease it right in the middle and wrap each petal around my little marker or pen or whatever this thing is. I think it's a nice little felt pen. Okay, so we're going to do that first. And then for the center of the roses, the first one, I didn't like how it turned out. So what I ended up doing was taking all of these and kind of scrunching them together really, really tight. Just as if, I mean, you've seen roses that haven't budded yet. Okay, and that's kind of what I did. I squeezed it just really as tight as I could. Be careful though, you don't want to rip the paper, but scrunch it real tight so that it kind of looks like, you know, those roses that just haven't budded yet. Okay, and then you can take and once you have held it there for just a minute or two, not a minute or two, maybe 20 seconds or so, go ahead and release it. Okay, and you see that shape that it just naturally takes on like that? That looks good. Okay, but what we're going to do is I'm going to, and my hot glue gun actually busted in the last video. I don't know what the heck happened to it, but I'm going to put a little bit of glue just on this petal here, and I'm going to try to get it to hold this shape. Okay, so don't worry about being perfect at this point. Just try your best to get it to kind of hold that shape of, you know, a rose that just hasn't really fully budded yet. Okay, and I'm trying to see, I'm gonna hold that in place for just another second or so to make sure that it stays. And then I think I'm just gonna take this flower petal here and I'm just gonna glue that to this one here, or these two here. Just gonna hold that in place like so. And this is where the hot glue gun really comes into play, because with the hot glue, you won't have to sit there and wait for this to dry, where I'm gonna have to hold this for quite some time to get it to really set. Okay, so for something like this, I really highly recommend using a hot glue gun. Mine kind of is DOA, and it was so late that my Joann was closed, so I couldn't go run and get another one. So anyway, let me show you what you're able to accomplish with like a hot glue gun. You can see the center of that. It's a little tighter. Okay, so kind of going for that look on the inside, but from the side there, that looks pretty good actually. So I'm quite happy with that. Once you get that little centerpiece all done, we're going to go ahead and drop a little line of glue around the bottom of our stamen here. And all we're going to do is slide this piece through all the way up and just pop it right in there until that stamen is nice and flush with this piece. Try to make sure that it's centered. And there's the beginning of our rose. Okay. Now, I probably should have done this before I put this on there, but I'll just use a little tool and just kind of flare those little stamen out a little bit more. So maybe do that before you put it out there, but that's fine too. You can see that they're a little more loose now. Okay, so give that a chance to set before we move on here. Okay, so next one here, we'll grab the next petal. I'm gonna grab my 1/4" dowel and give these a slight train. Not too much, just a little bit. You can see how subtle that is. I have no idea what this thing is, but I really like that it's metal and it's really thin. And I really went very random with the rows here. And I like this really thin tool because it really gives me a lot of small little details that I really like as far as the training goes. So up and down, left and right, some of them tighter than others, some of them less tight. Just be super random and just kind of create that if you want. Or if you don't, you can just train them like this and keep it a little more, I don't know, less random and a little more perfect, I guess. But I kind of like what's happening here with this small tool, and I'm just going with it. Okay, and maybe just a little subtle on that, and not as much here. Okay, so let's get this one on here. That seems to be holding pretty well. So I'm going to add my glue to the bottom of this guy here. Okay, and these are both the same size, so it doesn't matter which one goes on next. And I'm going to feed that down until it's nice and flush there. And after everything dries nicely, we can go in and finesse these a little bit more. There I go with the finessing again. And our next little layer of glue. Slide this one through. And the important thing here is to offset the petals. So just make sure that they're not right on top of each other. You want them kind of staggered, just like that. Okay, get that nice and centered. And let's just kind of leave that sit for just a minute while it sets. I'm going to put that dangling off my table while we train and kind of finesse those petals. Okay, so again with these, give them a slight little train. Okay, and again, I'm going to curl randomly up and down, left and right, in and out. Just whatever feels random. Like the less you think about it, the better it's probably going to end up. Maybe one just has a little crease right there, and it's going out that way. Okay, I like that. That's fine. And let's curl that. Let's curl this one at a different angle, maybe. There's that, there's that. There's a little bit of that. Just go random. Okay, oh, I forgot to train this up. I'm just gonna do that. Just kind of pulling on those fibers a little bit. All right, and then let's get our flower. And just a little bit of glue there at the bottom. And slide this one up. These are both the same size, so it doesn't matter which one you do where. Just make sure, again, that you stagger the petals, just like that. I'm gonna give it a good little squeeze there. Okay. There we go. It's looking really nice. And last but not least, one more little zip of glue. And let's get our last flower on here. And again, staggering the petals. Keep it interesting. There we go. And voila. Okay, so we're just going to let that dry. But there is our beautiful little rose. I'd say that that looks fantastic. All right, now I'm gonna get this piece on here. I'm gonna take, and with the texture side like this, I'm gonna flip this over and curl these petals down, or these little leaves, I should say. And we're gonna put glue right on that guy there. And we're just gonna slide this through until it meets the bottom there. Okay. I'll just work that all the way up against the bottom petal. There we go. Okay, so there you have that. And as long as that's touching, you should be in good shape. And then last but not least, we've got the little leaf here. I'm gonna train that backwards so as it's hanging off of the floral stem there, you know, that it's showing the nice texture and all the beautiful inking that we did. And then you can even kind of finesse some of these individual little petals in and out, or these individual little sections here, just to kind of make it even more random. Okay, so as far as the little leaf goes, you want to make sure that you don't have it too far down because of this arrangement and because of where we're going to be placing the roses. You want them kind of, once you get them trained, to almost be hitting the little roses there. Okay, so excuse me, let's get our little floral tape here. I'm just going to cut that off. And let's just get our floral tape ready. And let's get that in place. It kind of helps to kind of sandwich that, or just kind of press it up against the little floral stem there, just to kind of give it a round shape since it is flat. And then just wrap some floral tape around the little leaf there and go down just a little extra to give it some little extra support, and there is your pretty little rose. Okay, so one flower down. Let's put that off to the side. You can see how pretty those look together. Okay, so again, you're going to do that 3 more times. You're making a total of 4 roses. All right, let's take a look at our mum. Here is my completed mum, and it's really pretty. So this is going to be great for fall too. You could make a whole planter full of just mums if you want. Okay, so here are the pieces for the mum, and they are all different sizes from small to large. And this one is actually pretty easy to put together. And of course, we're going to do some inking with this. You can use a dark pink. I went with a red on this because red, if you kind of burn it a little bit, I'm sorry, pink, if you kind of burn it a little bit, probably gives off a nice little red color. So we're going to go around and just ink this. And I'm not too concerned about these inner parts here where you see the cuts. Okay, I'm just going to focus on the outside little scalloped petal portions, and we're just going to ink the edges of that. Okay, so that will make quicker work of this. Okay, so just get the tips nice and inked. And that's going to make these guys pop even more. The smaller one here is probably a little more challenging to ink because it's small. But I'm sure you guys are going to do a great job. Okay, and you're going to be making a total of 2 mums. Our mums are going to be, I think, kind of front and center in the arrangements. So make them nice. Okay, just very subtle there. And you can go deeper with the color by just getting more ink on your applicator here and just applying a little more force when you're doing the inking. Okay, so that looks good, and on to the next one. And don't be afraid to kind of work quick. Okay, because you've got to, if you're going to ink these flowers, you've got a lot of inking to do. I think once you get your feet wet and kind of get that stroke down, you'll be able to repeat it fairly easily and pretty accurately too. And again, don't be overly concerned with perfection. There's going to be so much going on in this arrangement that the eye is not even going to have enough time to soak it all in at once. And rarely, unless you're out doing like macro photography of flowers, or you're really analyzing every little aspect of every little piece of a flower, you're kind of just soaking in the beauty of everything in your visual field. So do your best to add the interest, but not at the cost of your interest in working on the project. Okay, there we go. That's looking sharp. And on to the next one. And as far as like the training on this goes, it's pretty easy. We're actually just going to be cupping this one and maybe bending it just a tad. So that's going to go pretty quick as well. And this is going to go together nicely. Definitely set aside some time for this project. This one is going to be extra special, so it's going to require a little extra love and a little extra time. And just enjoy the process. For me, I really love working on these flowers. I was listening to news. I actually gifted myself, and some of you have probably seen these ads on Facebook for Masterclass. It's a website where they have celebrities and world-renowned, masters of certain crafts that kind of teach you not everything they know, but a lot of the things they know. And I was reading about, or I was watching videos on, and I don't know all the people's names by heart, but some film score composers, and they were sharing their secrets and their processes on how they work. And I was watching Chef Ramsay, another chef. I learned how to make French scrambled eggs, and it's a good time to kind of either get lost in some music or put something on in the background that you enjoy, because this process doesn't require a lot of mental power and attention. This is very much like playing an instrument, where after a while it's an exercise of muscle memory. I'm just dabbing and stroking, and applying this ink, and it's a very meditative thing. So my brain can be in another place, whether it's watching old Martha Stewart videos, or catching up on news, or listening to music. This is exactly why I was actually telling Ron today, if I could just make flowers like this out of paper for the rest of my life, I would not complain, because it's a labor of love, and it's a very meditative thing, and it's something that I feel that we're all lacking in this fast-paced society that we live in. Even though I'm out in the country, I still feel it. Not as bad as I would if I lived in the heart of Chicago, but man, Facebook and social media and text message this, and you got to get this done, and you got to be here at this time, and it can be overwhelming. So I'm fortunate enough to where I can call this my work and really appreciate the process and the time that I get when I get to do this. And I think you should too. I really think you should embrace and take on a project like this every once in a while, just to kind of restore some peace into your life. If you have a really hectic schedule with kids and school and sports and dinner and this and that, rather than consuming more television directly and exclusively at night, maybe make some flowers instead. I think it might be better for your soul. All right, so as you can see here, we're really moving along here and progressing pretty quickly. Now, I had a lot of ink on my pad there, but that's okay. Maybe that petal was a little dehydrated and the sun beat up on it a little more than its neighbors. And maybe that's why it's a little bit darker. And that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. Okay. So you can feel free to kind of skip past this if you kind of get the gist, but I just wanted to show the entire process and maybe chat with you a little bit. And I know a lot of you really enjoy crafting with me and just hanging out. So it's up to you. Luckily, with technology, you can fast forward if you think I'm boring. And that's okay. All right. Last little petal here. There we go. Okay, so we're done with that. And while we're on the actual inking, we may as well finish up the inking. Now, I accidentally inked this already. Just like we did with the previous flower, I just hit it with some dark green. That was the cottage ivy color. Okay, and I did that with the bottom and the leaf. And then we have two more pieces here, the inner part here and the little stamen pieces. I'm going to hit that with a little bit of an orange. I'm going to go with my pumpkin spice color for this. It gives me a nice little kind of a burnt yellow. I like that better. Actually, I need to get some more of this pumpkin spice. It's actually, I'm trying to think, did I use that or maybe not? Let's see. No, I didn't. I am going to go with the orange here. I think that's what I used. Let's see. Let's find out. Let's get a little orange on there. And I am really going to hit the tips of these. Yeah, it was orange actually. It kind of gives a little pumpkin spice feel, maybe because the paper itself is already kind of orange. So I'm actually hitting the surface of this, and I'm going lighter as I work my way to the inside of this piece. Okay, so kind of more color on the edge, less pressure as I'm coming in to kind of create a nice little gradient effect on this piece here. Okay. There we go. There we go. I think one of them might be a little bit heavier than the others, but I like that. That works for me. And then let's grab our little stamen pieces here, and I'm just going to hit the tips of this. Same kind of stroke, but I'm hitting the surface completely with this. And I'm going to flip this around and do the back as well, because sometimes after we curl these a little bit, you do end up seeing the back part of it. And you know, it's funny, the smooth side of the AC cardstock doesn't absorb the ink as evenly as the textured side, but that's okay. All right, so inking is done for our mum. Let me pop these back on and get them out of the way, and we can begin kind of putting this together. Now for this piece here, we're just going to take this and kind of curl them out. Okay, and I'm also going to take them and, just like the rest of these, I'm going to take my dowel and just wrap and pinch each petal to kind of make it kind of curved, so that it's almost like I don't know how else to explain it. Just taking my dowel and putting it in the center and then wrapping the long sides around the dowel to give it that look. And just pinching on both sides. Okay, and then we're literally going to do that with the rest of the flowers, of the petals as well. I'm not worried about the stamen right now. Okay, so again, let's just make sure that we have these in order from smallest to largest. And I think I do, yeah, I do. Okay, so let's take this, I'm gonna grab, that's probably good. And I'm just gonna take that and press that to kind of curl it like that. Okay, so you can see that right there. So it's not flat, but it's curving in on both sides. Okay, so let's just do that all the way around, and we're going to repeat that process for all of these petals. Okay, there we go. So that one's done. You can see the dimension there compared to this with just a simple, and look at how the light's hitting that. It's beautiful. Okay, so let's put that off to the side. Let's grab the next one and just continue doing the same thing. Just going to just press that up against my little pen here. You can use a dowel if you want. And then as we get into the larger petals, we're going to use a larger dowel or whatever it is that you want to use to kind of shape these. Now, this is still working fine for me. Okay, so I'm just going around and just sandwiching that. There we go. There we go. Okay, now with this one, let's see. Is it time for the 3/8 inch? It may not be. Nope. I'm going to continue with this pen. It seems to be treating me well. So I'm just going to keep with this guy here. Okay. Just like that, real quick. There we go. And last but not least, could probably use the 3/8 inch on this guy, yep. And just kind of sandwiching it and wrapping it around the dowel there. Voila. And we are good. Okay, so let's see. We're gonna need our little floral stem here, and we're gonna wrap this in a dark green because we've got dark green leaves on this. So just like we did with the previous flower, just grab your stem and make sure you get enough and pull it out a little bit to reveal some of that sticky that's built into the floral tape. Just wrap it around your floral wire all the way down to the bottom and just give it a rip. That was easy. All right, now we can grab our little stamen and we'll get our stamen piece in place. Okay, so let's do this. Let's throw a little bit of glue right on there, and then just little dots of glue all the way down. Okay, so place your little floral wire, your little stem there, right along the edge. And we're just going to take it and wrap it around itself while connected to the floral stem. And just hold it in place. Got a little extra glue on me there. Okay, just hold it in place until it sets completely. Okay, so give it a few seconds to really get a hold before we move on. And then we can begin constructing our beautiful little flower here. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is we're just going to put a little line of glue all the way around this thing, and I am going way too heavy on that. So I'm just going to take a scrap applicator and pull some of that off. We don't need all that. And let's take this little piece here and feed it through. And just until it butts up against the bottom of the stamen there. Okay. And we don't have to, you can flare this out now if you want. It's up to you. You can always do it later too. It's not a big deal. But get that right up against the bottom there. Okay. And then the next thing you want to do is find the smallest piece. And let's get our glue on the bottom of this guy. Just very little amounts of glue is all you need. It doesn't have to even go all the way around. It's better if it does, but it doesn't have to. And let's slide that through until it meets there. And we're going to finesse this after everything dries. Let's not worry too much about the shape of it right now. You can kind of scrunch this up if you want a little bit, but it's more important that everything kind of sets right now. So I'm going to put that off to the side for a second. Okay, and if you look at the one that I've already completed, you can see that the top layer here, everything's kind of folded up. The middle layers are kind of flat, and then the bottom layers are folded down. So that's something that we want to kind of pay attention to as we progress through the assembly of this flower. So that's something that I could have done with this guy here. Okay, so I just took the whole flower and just kind of brought it up a little bit, and that's fine. Like I said, we can always wait until that's more dry before we start messing with that stuff. All right, so we want to find the next largest layer, and I'm just going to fold these up just a tiny little bit, not all the way, just a smidge. Okay, and let's just get that in place. We can let this thing really dry as we're working on the next flower after this. Okay, so let's feed that through. And you want to make sure that you are staggering these petals so that they're not right on top of each other. So these larger scallops, you want them to be in between the two larger scallops on the previous layer. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. You can see that there. There's the large scallop on the current layer in between the two large scallops on the previous layer. And I'm just kind of pulling to make sure that that's grabbing that glue that we just laid down. I'm just going to put that down for a second, grab my next piece. And this piece here, I don't actually want to bend this much at all. I think if anything, I probably am going to leave this one flat. Let's leave that flat. Let's just get our next layer on here. So get your glue on this next little petal here. And let's slide that through. There we go. Again, making sure that you are staggering the petals just to get as much of that surface area as you can. Okay, and make sure that it's hitting that glue that we just put down. There we go. Okay, I'm going to put that off to the side. All right, now these last two layers, again, let's make sure we've got, this is the largest one. This, we're going to bend these down just a tad, just a little bit. Don't need to go too crazy, just a tiny little bit. There we go. And if you're using hot glue, you can probably work as quick as I am right now. If you're using regular glue like I am right now, I would probably wait a little bit longer in between each layer so that we don't inadvertently mess anything up. Okay, so again, staggering the petals and getting it right up against that last layer, making sure it's nice and tight. Okay, let's put that off to the side. And this last layer here, we're going to bend these down more than we did the previous layer because we want them kind of coming downward to make the, oh look, I forgot to fold one of these here. We want to make this flower look nice and full. Okay, so let's get our glue on the next layer and slide that through. There we go. And again, stagger those petals. Okay, and there we go. Now, again, we're going to wait for this to really set before we start fluffing these things up more because it's still a little wobbly. That glue just really needs some time to really get a hold. And then all that's left is this little piece here. I'm going to take and train these petals down like that. I want my texture side up. Oops. Just like that. Get my glue right on there. Slide it through. And just pop it right up against the bottom of the flower like that. That's going to hold everything nice and in place. You can throw a little bit of hot glue right on the bottom of that too if you want to kind of create a little stopper. And I'm just going to squeeze this and get it real nice and tight with my fingers. Just make sure all those layers of glue are touching nicely. And I'm going to let that set. Now, of course, we have got our little leaf here as well, just like we did with the previous flower. And I'm going to take and just add some random angles to it here and there. If you want to get even more detailed, you can grab a smaller little tool and angle each of these little areas here. I don't think that's really necessary though. Our focal point is going to be the flowers, so I doubt anyone's going to be paying too much attention to the little details on this, but it definitely does help add a little bit of interesting light to this project by doing something like that. So just like we did with the previous flower, you want to keep it somewhat close to the flower, and I'm going to probably train that just a little bit more. So that's got more of a droop. And I'm going to grab my floral tape. And again, I'm going to kind of squeeze it up against the floral stem there. And let's just get that adhered, or taped down, I should say. Yeah, it's about good. And just wrap that around a couple times, make sure it doesn't go anywhere. And about that height is good. Work that tape down, and now it is pretty much permanent. Okay, I'm gonna make that droop a little more. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna let that really set, and then towards the end of the video, when we start doing the actual arrangement, we'll kind of finesse this a little bit more, and I'll show you how to get the most life out of this thing. Okay, so on to our next flower. This is labeled as the fantasy flower, and the reason for that is because it really doesn't exist in nature. This is a kind of a made-up flower, and it's really pretty. And we're going to begin by inking it, and I'm hitting it with a, this is Eggplant. This is a chalk ink by VersaMagic, or Dewdrop, I should say. And just like I've done with the rest of the flowers, I'm just grazing the edge and hitting the surface ever so slightly. And this one is, this one's got a lot of little nooks and crannies here. And for some reason, this isn't applying very well. I think I'm starting to run out of this eggplant color. I really use it a lot. That's okay. So, ink, ink, ink. We've got 2 more little flowers here to ink, and then we're gonna put our planter together and finally work on our arrangements. Now we've got some Spanish moss, and then we've also picked up some baby's breath from the floral section of, I believe it was probably Hobby Lobby, or who knows. And I think some of you have actually asked us to create a paper version of baby's breath, but unfortunately, I think that would be a beyond tedious affair, because there's so much little detail to it. I'm not really sure how we would recreate that with paper. So we're this is kind of a mixed media project, so to speak, because we're using paper flowers, but also adding some actual faux flowers from the craft store as well. So that's very subtle. I think I'm going to probably go a little bit darker on these and get a little more ink on my applicator, because that is looking kind of weak. Okay, so once we get done inking, and again, as I've mentioned, the inking process is optional. It will probably save you some time if you don't ink, but if you're gonna do it, if you're gonna work on this project, you may as well spend the extra time and get your pieces nice and inked. It'll just look great. Okay, so again, just use your muscle memory, kind of space out. I kind of wish that I could, listen to my master class while I'm doing this, but that would probably be annoying for you guys. So I just got to bite the bullet here. Okay, getting my ink on there. So you're welcome to fast forward past this part, since it is kind of repetitive, but just want to show you everything that I do to create these projects, so that if you love it the way it is, you can recreate it verbatim. Yeah, I think it is time to get myself a new eggplant ink pad here. Okay. One thing I'll mention here as we actually assemble this flower, because these 2 last pieces are very similar in size, but there is a way to tell the difference. So we'll get to that here in a bit. Now these wider petals, I'm going to bring the ink in a little bit more on the surface, just to kind of balance it out more. boy, I'm gonna be excited when we get this product released for you guys. So I think you're gonna be pretty excited to see it and to have a go at it. Yeah, this thing is starting to run out of ink. I get sad when I run out of ink on my ink pads, especially the ones that I've used for quite some time, because the you know, they're not brand new, so they don't soak up the applicator as quickly, and it's just a little more efficient. It's like fine wine. Okay, so let's get that inked, and then you can see here the other pieces. I kind of already pre-inked them. I jumped the gun on that, but I hit those with a light turquoise color to kind of complement that mint green. Okay, so a few more little petals here. We've got one more set that will finalize this flower here and get that inked. There we go. Okay, so last one. Oh, by the way, just want to show you here. This is the order in which you're going to put these on, from smallest to largest. These two, again, they look kind of the same as far as the width, but you'll notice that the angle on this is less and the angle on this one is more. This one we're going to call the largest piece, and that's going to go on last. So it's the one with the larger angle there towards the base of the flower. Okay, so let's just finish up our inking, and I'm getting really excited to bring this into the dining room. I'm not shooting in the studio today. I have to finish this up while I still have daylight if I want to get this released today, because I'm shooting natural light in the dining room today, and I have to make sure I get it all done before the sun goes down. Otherwise, I may have to bring it back into the studio and try to recreate that setup in here, which is going to set me back even more. So hopefully all goes well with this. Luckily, I've already got most of the flowers pre-made, so it should go smoothly. And I'm actually trying to recreate the natural light that I get in my dining room, in my studio. And I've talked to a friend of mine out of Washington who is a cinematographer. He's a director of photography. He runs cameras. He's worked for the Portland Trail Blazers and Nike, and anytime I have questions about lighting, I call him up and show him what I want, show him what I have, and he just gives me some advice on gear, and usually I'm able to recreate the look that I'm going for. Okay, so for the stamen pieces here, on the fantasy flower, we're going to tip these. We're going to hit this with a light turquoise color. Let's see, I think I could get away with using this ink pad. We're just going to take this and just hit the tips of this with some turquoise to give it a little bit of color at the tips. Just be kind of random with it, and I'm going to flip it around and do the other side as well, just in case. Just want to hit it with a little bit of color. There we go. Okay, so now with this guy here, we are going to use, all right, so I've got my floral stem here. We're going to use some light green floral tape to wrap our
floral stem here. And I always just put a little bit on top just to cover up the top, and then just run it down. Just kind of twirl it as you go down. Make sure you stretch it to get that sticky release so it holds better. Get it to the bottom, just tear it off. Okay, there we go. And as usual, we're gonna start with our little stamen here. And I'm gonna curl this with my dowel just to kind of train it to be round. And let me make sure my glue, I forgot to put my cap on my glue last night. Oh no. Luckily it's still flowing nicely. Put a little dot of glue right there. And maybe just kind of twirl that stem around a little bit, and then just get your glue all the way down the base of the stamen piece there, and then we're just gonna curl it around the floral stem here. And I'm getting a little bit of glue gushing out, but that's okay. That's actually gonna help hold it together better. And we're just gonna squeeze and hold that just briefly to get it to kind of stick and hold. And we can put that off to the side and let it set. And now we can take a look at these guys here. So we're gonna build these flowers. The first two layers, we're gonna curl inward. Okay, so we want to curl them in like so. And curl these in as well. Okay, and you can just kind of fold at the score marks. All right, and then we have this little tiny little tab here. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna put glue on the tab, and we're gonna tuck it behind the petal on the opposite side there, like this, right behind there. You can actually flatten this out and glue it down flat just to make it easier. So fold it in half, put your thumb on that little tab and squeeze it until it sets, and then you can open it up, okay, and then you have your first layer of petals, okay. So let's let that set. Let's go to the next one here and just fold the petals in. Okay, and again, just get your glue on the little tab there, and you can totally just fold it in half. That actually will make it even more precise, believe it or not. And just push to get that glued into place, and there's your second set of petals. And then for the last two layers, we're actually going to train the petals down, okay, just like that, but we're going to glue them together just as we did the first set, okay. And again, just get your glue on this little tab here, and we can fold it in half just like we did and push down. And get that to stick. There we go. And the last one. Again, we're going to train these downward. So I'm using the same stroke, I just have it flipped upside down. Okay, and fold. And let's get that tab folded. Get your glue on the tab. And you can fold it in half. Glue that tab down onto the back side of the neighboring petal. And there we go. Okay, so we've got that done. Now this piece here, we're actually going to glue this to the bottom of the last set of petals. Okay, so we're going to do that later, but we may as well get it trained and get it ready. And then of course we have our little leaf here, and I'm going to train that backward. Okay, and give it a good fold, and then again, you can kind of finesse all these little sections here, kind of give them their own little personality so they're not so flat. Give it a nice little curl in either direction. Okay, and that's pretty much ready to go. I may just kind of flare the tip up a little bit. That's pretty elegant, I'd say. Okay, so this guy has probably had enough of a chance to dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to train these little stamen pieces and flare them out. And as I'm moving inward, I'm training them just a tad bit less so that they're staggered nicely. Okay, kind of like that. That's fine. All right, so let's identify the smaller set of petals for our first layer. That's that guy there. And let's get our glue at the bottom of the stamen. And all we're doing is just sliding this up. Okay, just slide it up carefully and gently until the base of the stamen is flush with the surface of our first layer. That's perfect. I won't go any further. Beautiful. So we can go ahead and put glue on the bottom of this. Just like that. Grab our next layer, slide it through. Okay, and of course, we want to stagger the petals so that they're not right on top of each other, like so. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let me stagger them just a little more. Now, I probably should have waited a little bit longer for that first layer to completely dry. And I'm going to recommend you do that. If you're using hot glue, you probably don't need to worry about it as much, but that's definitely helpful. Okay, so again, find the section here that has less of an angle. If you look at this as a triangle here in the center or at the base of the petals, find the one that has a more acute angle. It's acute. All right, so let's get our glue at the base of that guy there. Find our next layer and just shimmy it right up. Make sure that you get the petals staggered so you can see there's a petal here, and this one's going to go in between the two of those. Okay, and just pop it up there. Look at that. That's already looking great. Okay, and last but not least, we've got our next little layer here. Last petal layer. And again, I'm staggering the petals. Just kind of create some separation. There is your beautiful flower. Okay, that looks great. And now what we want to do is we're going to take this piece here, and what we're going to do, we're not only going to glue it to the base of this, but we're also going to glue a portion of each of the little leaves to the underside of the flower itself. Okay, so I'm going to kind of hold that. You want to line this up with one of the petals here. Okay, so what we're going to do, and this kind of helps if you let this set for just a minute before you move on, but what I would do is just put a little dot of glue on the underside of the petal like that. And then we're going to take this and push it up against the base there, like that. Okay, and that's just to get that to stick to the bottom of that petal nicely. You can see how that looks. This one's hanging loose. This one is actually up against the base of our petal there. So give that a second to set. I'm going to scoot over to the opposite side and throw a little dot of glue right on there. I'm going to push this petal up against it, or this little leaf, I should say. give it a good squeeze so that it holds. So you can see what that's kind of looking like. Okay, and then we're just gonna repeat that process with the rest of the little leaves here. Okay, and this is where the hot glue really comes into play because it makes quicker work of all this. With regular tacky glue, it works. You just have to be more patient with each little step here. And see, this hasn't even completely dried yet, and I'm already flailing it around, which I don't recommend, but for the sake of this video, I just kind of wanted to get it done for you so you don't have to sit here and wait for the glue to dry. Okay, let me flare this out a little bit. There we go. And we got a couple more here on this side. And then I'll stabilize this and let it really set how it's supposed to set once I'm done with this. I just wanted to get this out of the way so I could show you how it works. And I had a little extra glue on there, but that's okay. And last one here. Okay, so I'm gonna level this out, make sure it's nice and level. Okay, but there is your beautiful flower. We've got that piece on there. And then, of course, we've got the little leaf as well. So again, try to keep the leaf just below the actual flower portion. You don't want it too far down because it may get lost once we actually put together our final arrangement. Grab your floral tape and just wrap it around nicely. And scoot that up just a tad. Stretch that out and get that sticky out of there. I'm gonna go back up and cover up a little bit more of the base of that. There we go. And close that up. There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna let this flower set, but there she is, beautiful. So I've got, I think I have a total of 4 of these now, I think, right? Yeah, there's 4 of these. So you're gonna be making 4 of these. And let me move that aside. Oh, by the way, we take a look at the mum that we completed before this one. This thing is already dried. And as I mentioned, you can go ahead and take the center little petals and just kind of squeeze them inward to make them kind of stand up a little bit. Okay, and you can flare the little stamens out, then grab each layer and bring them up. And then that bottom layer, you can actually kind of push the petals down a little bit more. Okay, just to kind of make this thing more evenly distributed so that there's a nice bit of volume to the flower. Okay, so that looks good. I like that. So that one's done as well. And that just leaves our beautiful iris. Okay, so I'm gonna put that together. That's the last flower. And then we're gonna move on to assembling our actual planter. Okay, the last flower on our list here is the iris. And what you want to do is find 3 pieces that look like this, and 3 pieces that look like this, and 3 pieces that look like this, 1 piece that looks like that, and 3 pieces that look like that, and there's 2 little leaves that are going to go on that as well. So with this one here, we're going to ink this with a purple, and then we're going to hit just the edge with a nice blue color. You don't really need to ink too far down this flat part here. Okay, this should ink pretty quickly because of its shape. So just as I did with the previous flowers, I'm just kind of grazing the surface while focusing on hitting that edge. Okay, and I may hit the surface a little bit more in certain areas just to kind of change it up and not make it so monotonous. Okay, so we'll get this inked pretty quickly, I think. And there are a total of 3 of these irises. So you're going to do this 3 times. And the cool thing is too, if you get the bundle, you can use the other vase, or if you have our ABC Flowers bundle, you can use that vase and put these flowers in those vases. So you can definitely mix and match, which is pretty cool if you don't want to make the entire arrangement. I believe that we've separated all of the flowers into individual sets, and you can definitely make just one flower or one style of flower, I should say, and put it in an existing vase. That's always an idea. I've actually seen in some instances where people have made paper flowers, but then have put them in non-paper planters, like a cute little vintage, what did I see? I don't even know what it was. I want to say it was like one of those like tin milk jugs or something, or even in a mason jar or whatever. You know, whatever you find that can house some flowers, you can use that as your vase as well. So there's really no limit to what you can do with this stuff. We're trying to give you everything you need so that you can make everything out of paper, but don't hesitate to change it up and incorporate it into some other objects that you may have at home, or something that maybe you found at an antique shop or on the side of the road somewhere, or maybe you've got a really cool family heirloom that is just sitting around and you want to maybe beautify it so that you can display it at home. There's really no rules against that, that's for sure. All right, so I'm just gonna finish up the initial inking here, and then I'm gonna grab I got some new inks that I'm really excited about. Some new colors that I've never used before that I got to use on this bundle. The inks were 40% off at Joann Score. So I picked up, I think, 4 sets of inks. I got 16 new inks that I'm super pumped about. All right, so these little stamen pieces, we're gonna ink these as well. And because they're so thin, I'm gonna hit the surface of these a little bit more just to get a little more color on that. Okay. There we go. Just working my way through all of these little pieces, getting my ink on them. There we go. All right, one more, and then we've got some little decorative pieces for some of the petals that we're going to ink as well, and then we're going to ink. That's actually it. Okay, so that looks good. Now, let me find my blue ink pad. Okay, actually, I just realized that I had one already on my table here. I've got one called Night Sky, and I have one called Ocean Depth. I think that's the one I used for my initial flowers. Now with this, because I'm literally just hitting the edge of this, I'm not even using an applicator. I'm just going to hit that directly with the pad. And again, this is brand new, so it's really putting on a nice deep coat. And I'm just kind of hitting the sides here and occasionally maybe just grazing the surface a little bit more to get some of that color on the surface. And that just really makes it pop. Okay, so I'm gonna do the same thing here. I'm not going to worry too much about getting it into every little nook and cranny. I want it to be somewhat random, like that. Just going to go around and get that done. There we go. Inking is really fun, actually. There we go. I think that, yep, that's the color I used. Nice deep blue. So what we're seeing here is kind of a natural little progression of color. We go from a soft purple to a bit of a deeper purple, and then ultimately to a blue. It's kind of a nice, this is this edge part is I wouldn't call it a subtle gradient. It's pretty bold, but it's a kind of a natural transition of color. So that looks really cool. All right, almost done here. There we go. Voila. And our little stamen pieces. Just gonna hit those. Some of the blue, get that tip. I'm gonna go the other way there. And now these yellow pieces, we're gonna hit those with a little bit of a red or an orange. There we go. Okay, so that is done. These mint leaves here, mint colored leaves, I should say, I hit these with a turquoise. And I'm gonna grab, I think I'm gonna grab my red for these pieces here. And I'm gonna use my little applicator. And for these, just gonna definitely hit the edges nicely and then just barely graze the surface there. Just a tiny little bit. Like that. And then we'll get these guys here as well. I'm going to focus mostly on the edges here. This is a very small and delicate piece, so you could go crazy trying to apply ink to this, but I'm definitely going to kind of hit the tips of this a little bit to give it a little bit of a gradient look, so you can see how subtle that is, but how much interest it adds. Okay. And I get the tip. And I'm applying less pressure as I go down to kind of give it that gradient look. It's really nice to hit the tips of that, and the edges, I should say. Makes it look really cool. Okay, and maybe I'll just hit this one on the side here a little bit. Okay, all right, so we can start putting this guy together now. The way this is gonna work is we're gonna take and glue these face to face, okay, like this. And one is gonna curl down like this, and the other one's gonna curl down like this. So ultimately, well, let's just do this one step at a time here. Let's train this first. Okay, so I'm gonna start with a slight train. I'm gonna grab the big dowel, and what I wanna do is I'm gonna curl this all the way around the dowel, like this. Okay, and it looks like that blue ink was on so heavy that it didn't completely dry. That's okay though. Just be careful, make sure that your ink is dried before you move on to it. So kind of get it like that, at that much of a curve. Okay, and then this guy here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to curl it this way, like so. Okay, so that kind of comes in like that. And we're going to glue this together. Okay, but before we do, we're going to actually glue this piece onto this guy here. So what we want to do is, we want to train this as well, just to kind of get it to be round a little bit, like that. And let's get our glue on this guy. Make sure that you get that glue out to the tips. Now I went a little heavy on it, so I'm gonna dab this glue a little bit, flatten it out. Okay, and what you want to do is just about where the square part of this starts. You want to line that up and get it nice and centered right on this little petal here. Make sure that you're applying this to the one that has the little butt shape here. Okay, so that needs to go on like that. So we're going to repeat that process with the rest of these guys here. Again, train it up like that. And then this is a 3/8 inch dowel. I'm going to take this and I'm going to curl it back all the way. Give it a nice curl like that. Okay, and same thing with this. Let's curl that back. And let's apply our glue. Get that glue right out to the tips. We don't want any of those tips coming off. And get that applied just above where it becomes square. And just hold that in place for a few seconds while it sets, especially those little tips there. Okay, that one's a little cockeyed, but that's okay. I think I've been making flowers for way too long here the last few days, but that's okay. That's gonna look fine. All right, and then grab our last one here and train it, and then give it a good curl. Like so. Grab this little piece here, train it back, and let's get our glue on here. And just going to dab it with this little applicator, flatten that glue out a little bit. Okay. Get that right on our little petal here. And squeeze. There we go. All right, so again with these, we're going to train these backward and curl them as well. Just to kind of make them look like that. Train it backward, curl it like that. And our stamens, the stamens, we want to make these as random as possible. So I'm going to curl it back slightly, and then I'll curl it forward, and then maybe just curl the tip, just to kind of make it very random like that. And then maybe this one is just like that, and then maybe the tip is just curled a tiny bit, and then maybe this one just goes the opposite way completely, and then, oops, that's the top, that's the bottom, and then it's like that. Okay, so our next step now is to take these two pieces, the one with the little butt shape and then the one without the little butt shape, and we're gonna glue these. Wait a minute, did I do that right? No, I didn't. I actually trained this the wrong way. I think the other ones I did right. Yeah, I didn't do this one right. I gotta train it the other way. Let me curl this back this way. Okay, so we want these face to face. Textures go face to face like this. Okay, and I think this needs to kind of come down a little bit like that. Okay, and you know what? The tip of this, I'm gonna curl this even more with a smaller dowel. I want that really angling in like that. I'm gonna do that to the rest of these as well. Okay. All right, so grab one with the butt, grab one without the butt, and just apply glue to this little rectangular area and just put them face to face. And you can kind of just squeeze down here at the little rectangular area. Okay, and that is going to create your first little set of petals. Okay, and they're going to look like that on the flower. So just repeat that process a couple more times. Just get them face to face. So we can always finesse these a little bit more once we get them all glued, because they tend to, when you're working with them, they tend to kind of fall out of shape a little bit, and that's quite all right. Okay, last two. Let's get our glue on here, go face to face. When I say face to face, the texture side and the side that we inked, you want that together. And this, these ones that I just did here, this flower is a little more messy, I think, because it's kind of rushing with the ink, but that's okay. You can see the end result of one of the other two that I've made, and it's a little bit cleaner, but that's okay. You're not really going to notice, I don't think. All right, so we've got that ready to go. This little piece here, we're going to have the texture side is going to be out. I did is I curled it outward like this, and then I kind of just took, I guess I can use that one, and just kind of creased and pushed this along my little dowel here to kind of get it nice and round like that. And I've got ink all over me, geez. Just making a mess of this one. All right, we can go ahead and begin getting our tape on here. So with this one, we're using a light colored floral tape. And as usual, I'm going to begin by just wrapping the stem here with my tape. Oops. I'm so strong. Okay. Let's get that wrapped. And we're going to start by putting our little stamens on here. I just did it one at a time. You can try to do all three at the same time if you want, but I don't think you have to. And I wasn't even worried about gluing them on. Okay, so with the little square area here, that's the part that's going to be flush up against the actual stem. Let me zoom in for you here. Okay, so just get that lined up. Basically, you want it just right at where the flower or the stamen begins to kind of spread out and thicken up. Let me cut this off a little bit here. And, well, that's a disaster. Excuse me 1 second here. Let's get that out of the way. Okay, so I'm just going to begin by wrapping the stamen onto my stem here. So that's the first one. Okay, and we want to stagger these. So I'm going to take my next one and I'm going to put it right here. And again, we can finesse these later on. Actually, I'm going to put it right here, just to the other side of it. And just get that wrapped. There we go. That's number 2. And then grab our third one. And you can kind of play with this right now if you want, just to kind of space these out just a tiny bit and make them a little more random. Grab my third one and put it on one of the sides here and just get that wrapped around. Okay, and now with my floral tape here, because of the thickness of the next pieces, it may help to kind of build up the layers here of the floral tape. It'll stick a lot better and have a more flush base to rest against. Okay, so that's probably good. That looks good. All right, so what we want to do is I'm going to curl this a little bit, or just bend it so that this is kind of shaped like this. Okay, and I'm going to curl this in a little bit more. That's a little too much. Okay, I want it kind of like that. All right, so find just one side here. Oops. Like that. I want it kind of like that. Okay, we're going to glue that right to the side here, like so. Okay, or not glue, but using our floral tape. So let's get that in place. Now you got to be careful here because that little petal is kind of drooping, and you may accidentally hit it with your finger and rip it. So just be very careful as you're doing this, not to rip your flower. Okay, so there we go. Got the first one in place. I'll grab the next one. And again, we want it kind of like that, just like that. And I'm just going to move over, just think of this as like a little tripod. You want to try to stagger the leaves evenly so that you can get them separated. You know, you want to space it out so you can fit 3 nice and spaced out. And I'm talking like logistically spaced out, not like Timothy Leary spaced out. Okay. And again, just be careful as you're wrapping this not to accidentally grab one of the petals and tear it, because I did that once. Because these guys are just kind of just hanging there and tend to want to get in the way. Okay, but there's our second one. And again, we're going to finesse this a little bit more once everything's said and done. Okay, so that just leaves our last one here. And again, that should be just kind of drooping down. And I may add a little bit more glue to the inside here. I don't think I got enough. You want that to be glued down just to the point where this little yellow piece begins. Okay, so that one looks good. That one looks good too. This one, not so good. All right, so again, kind of have it like that. Okay, like that. And now with this one here, I'm going to put this one right here to balance it out nicely. Okay, and this is where it gets a little more challenging because you've got now 3 petals to try to navigate around, but it's not too bad. You just have to be aware of where these petals are. Once you get it around once or twice, then you're pretty much golden. Okay, here we go. Let's rip that off. Okay, so there we go. All right, so there is our beautiful iris. And we still have this little piece here that I'm going to adhere to probably just off the side a little bit so that it's a little more visible. It's not completely hidden by our beautiful little petals here. So I'm just going to pop that right about there and cover a good chunk of it with the floral tape. Just like that. And then once you have it on there, you can kind of pull it out a little bit so it sticks out more. And then again, as I mentioned, once we have this thing all complete, we can go around and kind of finesse the individual little petals more. We want these kind of curling in nicely like that. Don't worry about them all being at the same height. You want some sort of randomness to these. Okay, and there you go. So there's your beautiful iris. And then all that's left now is our little leaves here. And I'm putting the tall leaf towards the top. I'm going to train that a little bit so it's a little curved. And I'm going to kind of nudge it up against the stem here and wrap it. And kind of squeezing. And grab our floral tape. And just get that around. It's a lot harder to do when I can't get my face in there. So this is probably okay. And then the last one here, we're going to bring that down just a tad. Right about here. Kind of wrap that around the stem a little bit and anchor that with my floral tape. There we go. Okay. So there she is. And here's my other one. That one's not as droopy, and I think it's because I need to put a little dot of glue here. I didn't get this glued as deep in as I should have. Okay, so we're on the last leg here, and you can see here in front of me, I've got the pieces of the actual planter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin by putting the panels on here. And just want to do that to kind of stiffen this up, and it's of course always easier to work on these things when they're flat. So you can pretty much tell where all these pieces are going to go. So without further ado here, let's get going. I'm going to glue this large panel onto the large piece here. There's two of these and they're symmetrical. So do your best to get your glue all the way around this thing, and definitely make sure you get some glue right out to the edge as well. And you can see the little score marks on here, so do your best to position this so that you have a nice even border all the way around like that. And then just press and hold that down and let it set. Make sure that the very edge is nice and flush, as flush as you can make it. It's a pretty large piece, so if we have to go in and maybe clean up some of the edges that maybe aren't staying down completely, we can do that, but that should be good. And then while we have it, we've got a tiny little area here that is kind of lifting up, so I'm going to use my little painting technique where I just kind of slip a little bit of glue underneath it and just kind of paint that glue on there and then give it a little extra love. Okay, and just hold that for a few extra seconds. And while I have that on my table, I'm going to go ahead and fold these tabs up just to get them ready for action here. And then there's a tiny little lip up at the top as well that we want to fold over. Okay, so first piece looks pretty darn good. Put that off to the side for a second. And we have these little pieces here, and you can see the shape here. This is straight, and this is kind of curved. Look for the panel that's straight and curved, and we're going to get that glued into place. The smaller piece will be a lot easier to work on. There we go. And do your best to get that nice and centered, nice even border all the way around. And just press, put that down on your table. Let's fold these tabs and get them ready for action. And of course there's a tiny little lip here as well. Okay, that looks nice. Moving on to the next one here. And then we'll just looking back at this one here, I've got just a tiny little corner that is lifting up just ever so slightly. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of glue under there and just clean that up. There we go. Okay. And on to the next piece. Again, just make sure that you're finding the right panel for each of the base pieces for our little planter structure. And just the edges are probably the most important, so make sure you get that glue out to the very edge. Okay, nice and centered on the piece here. If it's off just a smidge, it's not the end of the world. I don't think you're really going to be able to tell all that much. Okay. Just be patient with it while it sets, and then get these tabs folded and prepped while you're pushing down with your other hand. Don't forget the little lip there. Give it a good push, and that looks good. A couple more here, and then we've got a base piece, and we'll be pretty much ready to do the fun part, and that's working on the arrangement. And I'm going to share the ultimate vision for it, but I probably will, just so that I can stand up and kind of get an eagle's eye view of what I'm doing. I may do most of my arrangement work and finessing off camera, so definitely take a look at the final product photo to help you with the placement of everything. You know, when Ron designed this project, kind of had a specific vision in mind as far as placement of everything, and we're going to try to recreate that as closely as possible because it looked great. But of course, you can arrange it however you want. Okay, so that looks good. Moving on, a couple more pieces here. And I suppose you can put these panels on later. I think it's just neater to do it while it's flat. It'll also kind of strengthen the piece a little bit too, so that as we're putting it together, it's a little more sturdy and easier to work with, more areas to grip. Okay, there we go. Get that on there nicely. You know what, I just realized I bought one of these, this little brayer. It's a Cricut brayer. And could totally do this too, to flatten that piece out and get that on there nicely. I don't know why I didn't do that before. Probably going to do that with this piece for sure. All right, so let's get this lined up. And let's get our glue on here. Let's get that glue out to the edge. There we go. And nice and centered on our piece. Use the little score marks as a guide. And mine is slightly off to the right. So I'm going to nudge it over to the left a tad. And grab this thing. Okay. And I have just a tiny little area here at the bottom. It's probably the same area as last time that I just didn't get enough glue on. I'm just going to fix that. Okay, here we go. All right, so again, let's just fold everything at the score marks here. And let's not forget the lip. I think I may have forgotten to do one of them. I did. I forgot to do this one. Just get those ready to go, ready for action. We're going to give these panels a little bit of time to dry. So while it's drying, let's take a look at this piece. This is the base of our little planter. So we want to begin with folding everything at the score marks. And that's just going to make it easier to work with. Get everything nice and folded. There we go. And we're just going to create a nice little platform for the actual planter portion to sit on. Add a little extra dimension to it. I'm going to fold this back to get it out of the way. And all we're doing is we're just joining these little triangular tabs to their neighbors. So I just put some glue on that little tab here, and I'm matching it up with the neighbor, nice and vertical alignment, and just hold and squeeze for a few seconds while that sets. Okay, fold that down. Next, this little tab here. Get your glue on there, just like that, and bring that up. Nice vertical alignment. You can see that there. And press and squeeze, let that get a grip. That's good. I'm going to go over to this side and let's get some glue on this tab here. And get that nice and aligned. Probably put a little too much glue on that one. This might take a little bit longer to dry because I put too much glue on it. But that's okay. And give that a squeeze. There we go. And next little tab here. Okay. Get that aligned. There we go. Okay, which leaves just these two little areas here. So let's get our glue on that tab and bring that in nice and aligned and squeeze. Just make sure that that holds nicely. And I'm going to tuck this other triangular tab in. Let's get our glue on this last little tab. I'm still holding the other tab down just to make sure that it really sticks. Okay, and then bring that tab in and glue it to the back side of this little section here and just hold and squeeze. Make sure you've got it nice and aligned. There we go. And last but not least, again, this is a lot of surface area here, so don't be intimidated. And if for some reason we don't get it right the first time, we'll get it right by just kind of cleaning it up a little bit. And don't forget that nice little line of glue right out to the edge, like that. Okay, and I'm going to take my finger and work that out to the very edge. Beautiful. All right, flare these out a little bit so that as we're bringing this down, it grabs more of that surface area. And let's close it up. Wow, Leo, good job. I'm impressed with myself right now. There we go. And just hold that down. I'll probably end up flipping this over and using this as the bottom instead of the top of the base, because this way, even though it's pretty much perfect, this part here is going to look even better because it was already joined. So this will probably be my front top. Okay, but that piece came out perfect, actually. All right, so we got that done. Now we're ready to assemble the actual top of the planter. So let's do that. Okay, so before we get started, what we want to do is kind of bend this a little bit to kind of give it a little bit of a curve. And the reason I didn't go right into assembling this right away is because I wanted these panels to really dry before we started creasing and bending these. Okay, so just give it a little bit of a curve just so that it's not fighting as much. Okay, so you can see here that one side is straight, one side is curved. The curved sides are going to be joined to the larger sides, and the straight sides are going to be connected together like this. Okay, but before we get into that, like I said, you want to go ahead and give this a slight bend and a slight curve. Just get those fibers kind of in the mindset that they're going to be bending and curving so that they're not straight. Just gently flex it a little bit here and there. Okay, and just so that it's got a slight little curve happening there. And that's just going to make life easier once we go to assemble this. All right, so I'm still just kind of working on bending this a little bit. I don't actually want to grab like a dowel and do this. I think that would be overkill. Just kind of stretching the fibers a little bit and easing all that tension. Okay. There we go. All right, so as I mentioned, the straight sides are going to be away from each other. The curved sides are going to be together like this. Okay, so we've got two curved sides here, and you'll see there's actually some numerals here. This one's 3 and this one's 4, so these go together. This one's 1 and this one's 2, so this one goes together. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue these together first, and then we're going to assemble them and glue them to the actual structure here. So let's begin by putting glue on just one of these tabs here. Okay, and let's do our best to get this nice and lined up with our little neighboring piece. So I've got 3 on my left and 4 on my right. Look at the little numerals there. 3 left, 4 right. Okay, and just hold that and squeeze until it sets, and then we can lift this next tab up and get our glue on here. And just follow that natural curve there and just squeeze that together. Getting a little too much glue on that one there, but that's okay. There we go. Moving right along. I'm going to try to be a little more sparse with the glue here. As I mentioned before, less is more. Make quicker work of this. There we go. And just give that a good squeeze just for a second or two. And you can see how quickly you can move on to the next tab if you limit the amount of glue that you put on these tabs. And that's just because it seeps and bonds into those paper fibers that much more quickly. And I'm sure that there's still some process going on where it's bonding more permanently, but for the sake of the assembly, I think it's strong enough to where you can move on to the next little step there. Okay, so I'm just very carefully and gently going down the line here and just making sure that I've got I've got everything nicely aligned here. And so far, so good. Let's get this last one in place. Maybe went a little heavy on the glue on that one there. Okay, and bam, get that connected. And we're gonna let this set while we work on the other one. So we're kind of alternating and doing it methodically so that we really give this glue a chance to really set before we incorporate it into the other piece, and then that way we don't have to worry about anything coming apart or whatever. So here's my number 1, here's my number 2, and we're just going to repeat that process again right here. Start with that first tab, get it nice and lined up at the top, make sure that the very top of it is on the same plane, I guess you can call it. And I'm just going to fold that over a little bit just to make sure that I've got that lined up precisely, and I do. Just give it a good squeeze and hold that. This first one's always the most important, I think. Okay, let's move on in here, get glue on the next tab. Try to work that glue up to the edge near the score mark as close as you can. It's really important that it bonds there so we don't have any gaps and holes. Okay. Moving on. I'm just, I said this before, but I'm excited to get this product out on the site. I think it's gonna come out really nice, and I should have plenty of light and plenty of time to do that today because things are going well. I haven't had any major issues with any boo-boos. No paper disasters today. Didn't really have too many issues with this bundle. I made one little mistake on the teacup. I just put the green leaves, I stacked them incorrectly and had to redo that, but it's okay. It's kind of hard to keep track of every little detail when my team gives me a bundle and I prepare to assemble it. You know, they've been working on getting everything digitized and designed, and miraculously, we don't make that many mistakes throughout the process, but occasionally it does happen. But it's never a major setback, so it's okay. All right, so last little piece here. That's looking good. Okay. All right. All right, so now I'm going to go back to this piece, which has had a good chance to really set and dry. And all we're going to do is just kind of repeat the same process here and get that connected like so. Okay, so I'm going to begin with this top tab here. Okay, and I'm going to join that right to the top there. Just make sure that you've got it nice and aligned. Just follow the natural curve of the piece here. Use this as a guide to get that aligned. Okay, I'm gonna hold that in place for a second, and that's just gonna go on like that. Okay, so let's just be patient while this anchor piece here sets before we get too crazy. I'm gonna flip this over, use my table to really push that down. Okay, and I'm gonna flip this little triangle in, get my glue on here. And flip it back like this so I can see that edge where the two meet, and just press that together again. And give that a good squeeze. Okay. And our third little triangle here. Flip that back around. There is our third one. Get that nice and matched up. There we go. Next little triangle. Try to get that glue out to the very edge if possible. Okay, I'm going to switch fingers here. Let's move this out of the way. Okay, and we've got two left here. Get our glue on the next little triangle and get that nice and lined up. Yeah, see this paper, now that we've got the panels on here, definitely makes it stiffer so it's less prone to getting warped from, you know, pressing and squeezing. It's kind of one of the reasons I like to get that stuff on there beforehand. You could do it the other way too if you want. You don't have to put the panels on first. You can always put them on later, but I always find that when I can work on a flat surface as much as possible, I always get better results. Okay, so there we go. That is in place. So we've got basically half of this thing glued together. Okay, and now don't really have to decide what we want to do next. I think just for the sake of making this easier to work with, I'm probably going to go onto this side here and glue this piece on next. Okay, so just going to repeat that same process again. Now this time the tabs are on this piece. Oops. And just get that nice and lined up right with the top. And just hold and squeeze for a few seconds. Let that set. That's looking good. And be very careful as you're moving this piece right now because it's only anchored by one tab. And then let's get glue on our next little tab here. Okay. And just get it nice and aligned and squeeze. Now that that second one's on there, it should be pretty structurally sound. Okay, so I've got my glue on that third tab and I'm just aligning it with the edge of the face of this thing. Just making sure that it's sloping accordingly. Okay. And that was a good squeeze. And moving on to the next tab here. We've got just a handful of more tabs to glue to finish this thing up. go. Next tab. Let me move this out of the way. I can kind of work from the bottom here. Give that a good squeeze. There we go. And last little tab in this section, so you can see it there, yep. Okay, get your glue on there and bring it back around so we can see the nice little edge there. And just hold that and squeeze it between your fingers. There we go. Okay, so this is going to come out like this. And now at this point, we're ready to start gluing this to this piece. And then we'll just close it up. So let's get our glue on this tab here. Get that glue right out to the edge. And get that nice and aligned with that piece there. Now this is already kind of, because it's connected to that other piece, it's almost taking on the form that we want it to take on, and it's making this process a little bit easier. This little lip here, you can kind of squeeze that between your fingers too so you don't crush it, and that's just fine. Okay. Now let's flip this around, and you can see the little tabs there. At some point during this assembly, you may not be able to see this because, well, it's going to be kind of hard for me to show you the inside. I need one of those little surgical cameras to get in there and show you what I'm doing, which would be kind of cool actually, but I don't think it's necessary because this process is pretty redundant at this point. I think you kind of get the gist of what's going on here, and you'll probably fast forward through this, but I just want to make sure that I cover everything so there's no questions. Sometimes I'll get an email or a question on Facebook, how does this go, or how does this go? And before, early on, we'd kind of just assume that everything made sense, and maybe to me it did at the time because of a tip that Diana or Ron gave me or whatever, but I don't want to resort to assuming that everything makes sense, so I'm just going to kind of cover every little detail, even if it makes the videos that much longer. So I'm flipping this over to apply glue to the next little tab in the sequence there, which you guys have seen now a good dozen times or so. And I'm just connecting it. I'll actually go from the bottom at this point now. It'll be easier. There we go. Beautiful. And that just leaves one more little tab in here. We'll get our glue on that guy, we'll close it up, and that just leaves one more little side here to assemble. Oh, hello there, ladybug. And I think this ladybug's like, oh, you got some flowers in here, huh? I haven't seen those outside yet. Okay, so that just leaves this section here. So let's get our glue on our tabs here. Okay, so I got that first part lined up. Now I'm just kind of flipping this over, bringing one of the tabs over, and getting my glue on the next tab, and just kind of looking at it from this angle just to make sure that the seams are nice and aligned. I want this planter. I put so much work into all the flowers that I just want to make sure that the presentation is just as beautiful as the flowers, because last thing you want to do is just kind of fudge or rush right at the tail end of a project like this and not put your your best work in at the end, because you know, your piece is only as good as its weakest link. So, you know, dig deep, find that patience. You shouldn't have to dig deep. This should be fun. I think the only reason that sometimes this process stresses me out is because I feel like I'm against the clock. You know, because we have to put products out in order to well, keep you guys engaged and keep you guys happy. I know a lot of you are waiting on the next bundle, and that, and also today I'm fighting against the clock because I'm shooting natural light, and I need to make sure that I give myself enough time before the sun goes down to get all my videos and all my photos done. So this is, you know, not the time to phone it in and start getting sloppy. So I'm definitely making sure that I do my best work even under the gun here. Okay, so last little tab, I don't know if you can see it. Probably not, but you know what we're doing at this point. And there it is, the last little connection. And this one's got a little bit of resistance because of the shape, but it's gonna hold nicely because I'm gonna be patient and get that glue in there nicely and make this thing beautiful. And that is looking great. Okay, so let's fold the lip portion of this in, because we're gonna put this upside down like so, and we're gonna put this down and close this up. Now, kind of get a feel for how it needs to be in order for it to be flush. Okay, and I can see here that I need to, you may need to just kind of nudge the corners here to get this wall to pop out a little bit. Okay, so anyway, let's get our glue on these tabs here. And you know, this, if you kind of get a little spastic with this little section here, it's not the end of the world, because this is going onto another base. And if you make a little boo-boo here, now's the time to do it, because it's going to be covered up. But again, let's try to make it as perfect as we can. As I say, just do your best. There we go. All right, and as always, kind of flare these up a little bit and close it up. And it helps to kind of nudge the sides a little bit like that. Just kind of squeeze them to get that to align nicely and perfectly. Wow, I'm on fire right now. I'm on fire. Okay, beautiful. And we can flip this over and just kind of push from the inside to get the rest of this to stick. Okay, let's take a look. Wow, good job, Leo. All right, now we can just throw a little bit of glue along the bottom here and take this piece and pop it in. That's our little liner that is going to help make that bottom a little more stable. Here we go. And then we have this little piece here. It's going to go right on top to kind of finish off this section here. And what I'm probably going to do is just do one little section at a time at first, maybe just anchor it on one side and then do the rest of it, just so that I'm sure that one side is going to look great, or one side is going to look perfect. I'm going to do it on this side. This is the side that the piece was joined on, so that edge is always going to look more perfect. And let's get our glue right on there. I'm going to spread that thin. And let's get this piece on there. Let's line it up perfectly. Right up to the edge here. And I need to apply more glue. I got it way too thin there. Let's try that again. There we go. This is tricky. It's a very thin little piece, but we got to get it nice and centered. There we go. And if you have to, do it in little stages. That's totally fine. And what I mean by that is if you need to kind of lift this up and reapply a little more glue in these areas here, that's totally fine. So as long as you get it nice and aligned, nice and lined up. I think the flowers are going to be covering this up mostly, so I'm not overly concerned about it being like super perfect, but it would be nice if it was, I think. Okay, so let's move this out of the way now, and let's just get our glue on the remainder of this perimeter here. And the rest of it should kind of just fall into place a little bit easier, I think, because we've got one side anchored. I'm going to spread that glue out. There we go. And let's close it up. There we go. There we go. That's better. So what ended up where I thought was going to be my front will probably now be my back, because I had to re-glue that back part and it slightly warped it. So this side actually turned out to be better, and that's totally fine. But like I said, I think the flowers are going to pretty much hide this little lip mostly. So again, don't worry too much about individual little details. We're after the big picture here, because I'm sure that even the Mona Lisa at this point has some blemishes. Okay, so our planter is pretty much done. Looks great. And now we're just going to glue this to this piece here. Okay, so let's get our glue on here. Give it a good amount of glue so that it definitely stays in place. Whoops. I think it's the last time I'm going to touch a glue bottle for quite some time, until the next bundle. Get that out to the edges. And then it may help to maybe get a little weight on this. Okay, so we want to just line that up so that it matches up nicely with our little planter, and just push down and hold that down. Make sure that you've got it lined up all the way around. And boy. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of keep giving it pressure just for a minute or so that it really kind of is nice and flush with the base of that. Okay. There we go. That looks good. Okay, so our planter is pretty much done. Take a look at the final photo of this. I've got some gold chain that I'm going to put along the base of this. I'm going to do that off camera. You don't need to see that. But that's that. And at this point, what we're going to do, you want to get your foam. I've already kind of cut it. Just grab a piece of foam and cut it so that it fits in there nicely. Yours can extend out a little bit further if you want it. I think this is fine because some of these plants or flowers are going to be coming in from the side. Okay, so you want to get that glued down so that it's permanent. And because my hot glue gun, rest in peace hot glue gun, just crapped out on me yesterday. I'm using this craft hobby glue to get this glued into place. Just whatever works. No one's really going to see this, so I'll just get that right in there. And just push that down. Give that a few seconds to hold. And this is actually very helpful to push this down against that base as well, because it's kind of spreading out the pressure more evenly, so I don't have to worry about crushing it. Okay, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to fill this with some Spanish moss, just to get that base nice and covered up. I always like to smell things, I don't know why. Let's get our Spanish moss out of here. What is that? Oh well. Okay, just fill in the corners nicely. And it's kind of cool looking if it kind of hangs out a little bit. Oh, this is going to be a mess. That's all right. Okay. I'll just fill in the corners. I'm going to get into the Spanish moss business. Yeah, it's funny how you can go to like Hobby Lobby and buy like acorns when you can find them on the ground. What a great business idea, huh? Okay, so there's our Spanish moss. Just get it covered, a nice thin layer. You don't want to overdo it. Okay, and we can begin getting our little flowers in there. What a mess. Thanks, Spanish moss. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with our little mum here, and I can already tell that this stick is going to be a little bit too long. So I'm going to grab my little cutters here, and I'm just going to trim this off a little bit. I don't want to trim off too much because I want to make sure that I have, you can always cut more, but you can't add to it later. So I'm going to cut this off a little bit more. We want this pretty much flush with the lip. Okay, so let me grab it from the back here. I'll shove it in there. I'm going to bend this forward a little bit and finesse the petals. Okay, that's a good start, I think. We're going to grab one of our fantasy flowers, and we're going to put a fantasy flower here and a fantasy flower here. So I'm going to cut off a little bit more of this. That is probably a little bit too much. And let's get our fantasy flower in here. And that's too much stick. I'm going to cut off a little more. Okay, got the little leaf there. I want it kind of facing forward and maybe a little bit out, like that. Okay, let's grab another fantasy flower, and I'm just going to trim this. Whoa there. Okay, I'm going to bend that forward a little bit, and I'm going to take off a little bit more. And let's pop that in. think that's probably pretty good. Okay, might need to push those in or out a little bit more depending on how things go. Our little rose here is going to go in the corner, so I'm going to trim that to about there. I want the leaves to be kind of up. Okay, so let's just shove that in a little bit more. There we go. Okay, let's grab another rose and let's put it on the other side. Okay, let's shove that right in and get the leaves up, facing up like that. Ooh, look how pretty. All right, now we're going to do another rose. This one's going to have a little bit of a longer stem because this rose is going to be right behind our mum and a little bit higher, like that. Okay, then let's go to the other side. Let's grab our other mum, and we're just going to kind of repeat that process on the other side. So this one's going to be semi-short, and we're going to stick that in here like that. Let's grab our fantasy flower. I'll trim the stem. I'm going to pull this forward a little bit and shove that in right about there. Get it pretty close to that rose. Grab my other fantasy flower. Oops. And kind of curl that, tilt it forward. Hopefully you can see that. Yeah, see that? The leaf on this might be a little bit too low. And what I'll do is I'm just going to curl, I'm just going to bring the stem down a little bit. Just have to improvise. And you won't really see that. Let's get that fantasy flower in there. Okay, beautiful. We've got, oh, wait a second here. I think this guy here, let's get this rose kind of coming up a little bit more. And let's get our other rose. This one's going to be a little bit taller. So let's stagger that onto this side maybe. I want the leaf maybe going this way, like that. Oh yeah, look at that. How cool is that? And that just leaves our irises, which are going to be like this. So we want to put 3 irises, one like that. This one's going to be a little bit lower. This one is going to be a little bit taller. Hopefully you can see that. And then this one is going to be a little bit lower too. I'm going to trim the stem on this a little bit. So they're kind of staggered. Oops, what did I do? There we go. Okay. Just kind of finesse things and move some things around. That looks good. Could probably bring this rose down a tiny bit, just be careful at this point. We've got so much cool stuff going on here. As I mentioned earlier, we wanted to fill this in with some baby's breath that we got at the local craft store. I don't know how I feel about the faux leaves on this, so I'm just gonna start down here and just trim that. And I see, I'm really not gonna see the leaves, but let's just add a touch of that in there. And I'll just trim that off about yay. So you pretty much get the idea here of what I'm after. And kudos to the Dreaming Tree team for another amazing job. Thanks to Ron for the beautiful design, and for Diana for getting everything digitized and making it all work so beautifully and so precisely. The end result is just amazing, I think. I'm so in love with this piece, and I knew I would be, and that's why I put my best foot forward. And again, you know, the baby's breath, that's optional. You don't have to do it. It does add a nice little contrast to the piece. Nice little hints of white here and there. I love it. This is really a gorgeous piece. And I hope you guys enjoyed this lengthy tutorial, but I mean, take a look at what we've created here. And I cannot wait to see your version of this in your colors, and you know, maybe you're going to add something else to it too. Who knows? But either way, I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. If you did, please take a moment to subscribe to us on YouTube. And if you do make this project, take a minute and visit us on our official group. On Facebook, just do a search for Dreaming Tree Group. We've got over 4,000 members in there that share wonderful works. So thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to crafting with you again.
Stay on top of all things Dreaming Tree and engage with us today. Get the latest news and enter in our giveaways on Facebook. Get inspired by following us on Pinterest. Be the first to see our new product launches on Instagram. Do you prefer Twitter? Yep, we're there too. Watch our beautiful product trailers and assembly tutorials on YouTube. For more information, visit www.3dsvg.com. Live, craft, love, and dream.